Welcome to another scripting basics tutorial for the video game ArmA 3. I'm Uncle from tacticalgamer.com, and in this tutorial it's going to be about some deeper aspects of using arrays within your scripts. I know it's going to seem kind of abstract, and I used to kind of avoid getting into this type of abstract stuff too, but eventually you get tired of having script errors and wondering why things aren't working the way you tested them to be. So to be honest, some of the things I'm going to cover I just figured out. And figured out by trying to put together this tutorial and running into mistakes. So there's bound to be mistakes from my earlier tutorials, and I'm going to contradict them in this one. But hey, onwards and upwards, right? So let's share some more ways in which we can work better with arrays. Firstly, before we talk about the variable type that we call an array, what is a variable? A variable is basically a container. We call the name of it an identifier, in which we will store data. When I use a variable identifier, I'm requesting the data that is stored in that variable as its named identifier. Now, there are operations we might want to do on the variable itself, which leads to a syntax that I found confusing too, like why some scripting commands require quotations around a variable name. Well, the answer is in the following. Okay, so let's say I've created a new variable called myVariable. Equals to the identifier is my variable. The scope is global because it's available to everything on that client computer. The data type was number and the value was 2. So here we are in the simulation here, and I brought up the debug console. Let's say I am going to put down the watch my variable. All right, and it doesn't equal anything right now. And let's say I wanted to check if it was already been used. I might use is nil. All right, is nil my variable, and I get no return. Okay, that is because I have to remember that when I'm using the term my variable, I'm asking for the value that's stored in that identifier or with that identifier. When I'm asking if the variable is nil itself, I'm actually not asking anything about the value. I'm asking something of the variable itself. So that's the reason why I need to include it in quotation marks. If I ask is nil my variable, I get true. Okay? Now let's assign a value to my variable, right? My variable equals 2. And then I will execute it. All right. Now my variable returns the value, and is nil my variable itself is false. Again, if I just remove the quotation marks on this, I would get no return. Okay. So I hope that makes sense about the reason why we would call a variable in its quotation marks if we wanted to do an operation on the variable as its own object, or whether or not we want to actually return what its value is. And finally, here we get to an array. An array is a data type where we have different elements, and they are indexed as following. The 1 is at index 0, the 2 is at index 1, and so forth. Let's take a look in the game. Okay, now here we are in game. I'm going to try and keep this moving quick. I'm going to bring up the debug console. I'm going to clear everything out. Okay, so let's say we are going to make a variable now named A, and we're going to make it to be an array. Okay, so let's say I've put it down in my watch window and it's returning nothing. Okay, I also want to make sure, even though it's returning nothing, that it is a nil variable, as in it's never been created. So is nil, and look at that, it's returning, well, nothing. Give it a second for the script error to go away because I was only halfway through typing the command. So is nil A is going to return nothing. Again, that's because I need to have quotation marks around it because I'm asking something about the actual variable. Is nil A is true because I've never used it. In a second, again, the script error will go away because I was halfway through typing the command. Watch items are processed every frame, so that's why you'll get script errors when you're halfway through typing them. Okay, so let's set A to be that array. A equals, and An array is enclosed in the square brackets. A statement is always ended by a semicolon. So let's put some elements in there, 1, 2, and 3. Okay, and I will execute it. And now a equals 1, 2, and 3. And isNull a is false because now the variable exists. Excellent. Okay, so the elements are at the 0 index we have a number 1, at the 1 index we have a number 2, and at the 2 index we have a number 3. All right, let's see how I can find that out. If I went a select 0, I'm going to get the first element, which is the 1. So this is what we mean about them being indexed. Select 2, right, is the third element because they start at 0. Okay, simple enough, right? Let's see what happens if I try to select an element at the index of 3, which doesn't exist, okay, because there's only 3 elements starting at 0. 0, 1, 2. 3 doesn't exist. So if I go select 3, it returns nothing. This is intended behavior because what it's going to do is allow you to select one past the array in the select command. If I went to 4, now I'm going to get an error. Error 0 divisor in such that that element doesn't exist. And so watch out for that. If you're using select command, make sure that you know how many elements are in your array, or you're at least checking for getting a null value back. Okay, so how could I check for a null value? All right, I cannot go, and I might as well let's see if I can get rid of this script error for now. Right, I know that I'm getting a null value on this a select 3. Well, I can't go isNull a select 3 or isNull. Well, wait a minute, but it's telling me that's true. Wait a second. Okay, well, what if I went select 0, which I know there is an element there? Well, I'm still getting true. All right, you're not getting a result here. So let's say if I go now, let's say create a new variable, b equals a select, whoops, and we were looking for 3, and I execute that, and then isNull, and I just change that in here to check for my new variable b, and it is true, isNull b, right? If I made b to be select 2, isNull b is false. So we would have to store an element of an array in another variable in order to use the isNull command to find out whether or not that element exists. Okay, one other thing about selecting elements out of range. We've gone on the positive side. We know we can go 1 additional, and anything past that is going to throw the script error. Let's go negative. Well, clearly there is no such thing as a negative index. It starts at 0 and moves up from there. There's no such thing as a -1 index, right? So if I went to a select -1, again, I'm going to get that error 0 divisor message. It doesn't matter what I put in there. As a negative number, it's always going to be an error 0 divisor message. So that is the select command using arrays and finding out of range indexes. And we've also talked about how to use isNull to check whether or not a variable has been created. Okay, I can also destroy a variable. isNull b is still showing us false because let's just find out what b is right now. It is a number. The value is 3. So if I wanted to destroy b as if it had never been created, I could go b equals nil. All right, execute that, and I've destroyed that variable. All right. Okay, I think that's it for the isNull at this point in time. We've also done that. Now let's move on to the set command. Okay, so set works, and I'll give you the syntax here. Set is by calling upon the name of the array, then the command set, and then it's going to be, the parameters are an array itself. So the elements are, first of all, the index, of the element that we want to add or change, all right, and the value that we want to assign to that index. All right, so in this case, let's say I want to change the number 1 to a 0. Okay, so in my element or my array A, I want to set the index 0 to be 0. I'm going to execute that. Bam. There we go. Okay, so now I've changed just one element out of the array. If I wanted to add another element to this array, I can use the set command again, okay, to go, let's see, element 0, 1, 2, 3. Okay, I'm going to add a fourth element at the index 3. I'm going to add a 4. And there we go. Easy enough. Now, what happens if I want to set element, I don't know, 7, 10, 122. Let's say if I go to element 9 and I want to add another value, and it doesn't have to be numbers, right? An array, the data type in here can be anything, objects, strings, Boolean values, anything. So let's say I'm going to say hello. All right, I'm going to add the string with the characters hello in it to element 9. But what happens to all the elements between, what do we got? 0, 1, 2, 3. Between, so element 4 to 7, or 8. What are they going to be? 0, 7. They're all going to be inserted as null values. So, right? So there's element 9. Okay, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4 are all null values. Right? Because I had to put something in there as a placeholder when I added an element at the end of the array. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense. So that's the set command and using set out of range. Okay. Let's try the find command. All right. I'm going to reset my A. Oh boy, it's way back there. There we go. So we went back to our simple, straightforward array. Okay. Now I want to find an value within this array. So the find command is going to be with this syntax. All right. We call what array we want to work with. We use find, and then we just add the value that we want to find. Okay. So the value I want to find is, let's say, 2. And the array is obviously A. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to put this down here in my watch window. A find 2 returns 1. Okay. So how could I use this? B equals A find 2 local exec, and it returns 1 because at index 0, 1, that's where the 2 is. Okay. Let's say now I had more than just 1 2 in this element, right? Let's say if I was going to go A, I'll just write it out right now. So A 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 4, 5, 4, whatever. Execute that. Oops, how about an equal sign? Execute that. Okay, so now I've got more than 1 2. Notice the A find 2 still only returns the first element that contains my value. It will not continue searching to find other elements that are there. Okay. Now, what else can I do? That's a good limitation to understand about that. We're going to move on to another command at the moment. Let's try delete add. Okay. Let's say if I wanted to delete that first 2, once I found it, I know I want to delete 2 out of that array. So this syntax is the array, the command delete at, and then the index of the element that I want to delete. So our array is A. I want to delete at the index 1 to delete that first 2. Execute it. Bam. Okay, so the first 2 has been removed, and the A find 2 is now returning that there's a 2 at index 3. Okay, so that is one way in which I could start to remove these 2's, and I could then say, start nesting these commands. So I'm going A find 2, right, and then A delete at A find 2 will then start deleting those 2's, right? I could do this for any of these elements. 5, delete at 5, and I'm removing just the 5's. There's another way to do this, okay, but we'll get there in a second. Let's go to the count command. So I'm going to go back a few statements, reset this to be the long version of this. All right, we're not using the find command anymore. All right, what we're going to do is we're going to count how many elements are in this array. So syntax for this is just count and then the name of the array, and it'll return the number of elements in there. So if I put it in the watch, count A, tells me that there's 8 elements, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They are indexed from 0 to 7. Right? So there is one easy method. Let's say if I wanted to use the set command and the count command to add an element to the end of an array, right? I could go A set, and the index would be count A, all right, and then, all right, so I'm going to add the value of a string hello at element 8 in this case, because count A is 8, and that is one easy way to do that. Another way of doing it is to use a scripting command called pushback. All right, I could go A push back, and let me use the camel cases. Stay consistent, A push back, and then my value, right? So if I was going to do that, I'd add this string world at the end of A. Okay, another way of doing it without having to use count. Okay, so that's pretty good. We've covered the find command, the count command. All right, now there is some other ways that we can operate with some arrays. Let me go back to that simple array. There we go. We're going to set A back to its only 3 parameters. All right. Now, let's say I've got A, and I've got another array B, and we're going to make an array C. So just to make sure I clean this out, I'm just going to say B equals nil. Clean that right out. B is now no longer, it's like it's the variable's never been used. Let's go B equals 1, 2, 3. So there's another array. Now, what if I said C equals A plus B? I can add arrays together, all right? And all it's doing is combining the elements of both arrays, okay, into that array. Now, I haven't tried this, but I'm going to try now, see if I can make a nested array this way. C equals nil. Let's clean that out. All right, C is equal to A. Well, let's do this first. Yeah, let's cover this first. C is equal to A. All right. The problem what this is we're going to see in a minute is this is C is actually not equal to 1, 2, 3. C is equal to pointing to A, which is then returning us this value. Okay, we're going to find out in a minute why this can cause us problems. All right, so what I'm going to do is jump ahead of this tutorial a bit. I'm going to use the deep copy or a copy command. Right, if I wanted to do that, I would go plus A, and you can see I'm getting the same result, but I'm actually having C is actually equal to this array now. It's its own copy of the array of A as it was at the time that we copied it. So what I'm going to do here to add two arrays together is I'm going to go it's equal to plus A plus, and I think I should just be able to go B at this point. Pardon me. All right. And let's do it this way. Let's see if this works. Bam. Okay. So with that command, I've made A and B, combined them into a nested array. See, the entire array is there, and it's the first element in C. And now the entire array of B is in there, and it's the second element of C. Right? So at this case, C select 1 is going to return me the array of numbers. C select 1. Oh, sorry, 1. The same mistake I make over and over again, right? Because they're indexed at 0. All right. So select 0 is the numbers, select 1 is the characters. It's just so easy to keep making this mistake and forgetting that your arrays are indexed from 0. Okay, let's get back to that copy error, or understanding that arrays are immutable. I've just destroyed variable B and C, all right, and let's say B equals A, which we know is just going to be a pointer to A. So now, let's say what happens if I change A. A equal or set index 0 at 1. Holy cow, look at that. Changed B. What happens if I change B? Set 0 2. So that's what I'm saying. B is really just a pointer to the variable A. It is not its own copy, right? Not as if I set C is equal to plus A. Whoops, A. Okay, now C is its own copy, right? Let's say if I go back to our set command and set B index 1 to, oh, who knows? I've got an object in the map named member1. So I'll make it an object type. See, now C is its own absolute copy of A as it was, right? Okay, so this is important. Let's go into the scripts, because now understanding local variables and global variables and even objective variables, we're going to see some very different behaviors that we need to understand what this is going to mean to us. Okay, so now I'm looking at script 1. Okay, and in this script, we are going to be using a local variable with the identifier A1. So underscore A1 means that this script variable can only exist in this running script, and it will be destroyed, will be inaccessible to anything else beyond that. I'm not 100% sure it would be destroyed at the end of the script, but I'm assuming so. I know it's not accessible elsewhere, so we wouldn't be able to monitor the value of A1 from our debug console, even on our own local machine. So system chat format is basically going to give me a text that says underscore A1 is equal to, and then this percent sign will be replaced by the actual value of A1, which would be the array with the elements 1, 2, and 3. All right, then I'm going to make A2 point to A1, okay? And then A3 is going to be a copy of A1's value. I'm going to then system chat out A2 and A3, and then it's going to change A1 and set the second element, element 1, which would be this 2, to a 1. So it'll now be A1 would be 1, 1, 3 instead of 1, 2, 3. Then it's just going to read out A2 and A3 just as a way of demonstrating that A2 will end up being 1, 1, 3, and A3 will still be 1, 2, 3. All right. So again, just an example of how to use copy. So in the game here, now I'm that guy standing up there on the rock, and let me just get to the debug console, and let's execute that script 1. All right, and then bring up my window down there on the left. We can see that A1 is equal to 1, 2, 3, A2 is 1, 2, 3, and so was A3. We changed the value of A1, and it automatically changed the A2 because A2 was only pointing to whatever the value of A1 is. All right, and A3 was a direct copy. So there's a pretty good example of that. Okay, here we go, script 5. Now this one is a little bit different. I've used global variables here. All right, and A1 is our simple array. A2 is a pointer, just pointing to the variable A1. It's going to print out the result of what A1 and A2 is. It's going to copy my height as a player, all right? And then it's going to wait until my height changes, and then it's going to execute a second script, all right? And it's going to let me know that it's executing it. All right, so that is simple as that. All right, script 6 is going to say, hey, script 6 is now setting the value of A1 to a couple of strings. It does so. Then it's just going to print out A1 and A2, and we will see if A2, right, is still pointing to A1, okay? And it's kind of unexpected because what happens in script 5 stays in script 5, and what happens in script 6 stays in script 6. And I don't quite understand why that is. I mean, we are using a global variable, but again, if you were counting on this to be able to be transferable because you were counting on this immutable property, you're going to get unexpected behavior. You really need to work with these things. So let's say execute script 5. All right, local exec that. Okay, A1 down on my lower left is 1, 2, 3, and A2 is 1, 2, 3. I'm just going to go crouched, and it's going to execute script 6. And A1 is now hello world, and A2 is still the array 1, 2, 3, like it has made a copy. Okay, so again, really make sure that if you want a copy, make a copy. And I don't know too often why you would want to create a pointer, but if you're creating a pointer thinking you're getting a copy, or creating a pointer thinking that you're always going to have like a redirecting kind of pointer, that's not the case. So be really careful about these types of properties in your scripts. Now let's go look at one more thing. Okay, object variables. Okay, now I haven't talked a lot about that in here. An object variable, let's look at this, just line 6 here. Okay, where I have an object, one of my playable units down there is member one of a group, and I've just named them in the editor. Okay, I'm going to create a variable named alpha, and because I am creating a variable like it's a separate object, it's in quotation marks, right? That is the identifier I'm creating. Okay, the variable is going to exist on the object of member 1, so that is the scope of it. All right, it is going to have, we're setting a simple array again, and I'm going to set it to be a not public variable. It will be a global variable on a global object, right? But it is not public as if it would be transferable to other machines on a network. Of course, I don't have other machines on this network. I'm going to create a local variable, which is only local to this script. All right, and I'm going to point it to the object variable. I'm just going to have some simple output so it tells me what's going on. I'm going to wait for the player to change height again, but this time I'm going to change the value of my local variable in the script. And what we will see is it is actually going to change the object variable value as well. Even though we've only changed the local variable in a script, it's going to change a global object's global variable. So let's check this out. Object variables is the name of my script. I think it should be in here because I just ran it. There it is. Let's run that. And my lower left, underscore beta is 123, and the object variable alpha on a playable unit is 123. If I stand back up, all right, change the beta value to a string of 1, the word 1, and the object variable again changed. All right, so I know it seems crazy and convoluted, but these are the kinds of little things you need to know about making copies or making redirect or pointers. It doesn't work the way you would really expect it to all the time. So, you know, be really careful about how you're manipulating arrays or how you're using pointers or trying to make copies of arrays. All right, so that's Uncle from tacticalgamer.com. The next tutorial is going to be what you need to know about iterating through arrays, because there's lots of common mistakes on that. Okay, catch you on the next one.